My name's Craig Ryan. I am the product manager for the molecular portfolio at Randox. Delighted today to be joined by Desiree, who's speaking about the management of CRS outbreaks in St Thomas's Hospital and how the implementation of 8 Vivalytics is going to help with managing the cases.
Screening for Candida auris using a non-saturated plate has been in place in the lab for like over 10-15 years. About in 2017 is when they introduced Biomerix Candida chromate plate, so the Candida zymes auris colonies were of a light pink color. However, it was more used as a media to exclude Candida albicans, which would grow in white or light pink colonies. So everything would have to be tested through the MALDI to have an ID, and then everything positive for C. auris would go through the VITEC for sensitivity. The lab started investigating new testing method for C. auris around October 2023, when an outbreak of C. auris was identified in our vascular unit. By January 2024, the outbreak is actually was in a bigger cluster across the adult ICU and the cardiovascular unit. At that point, they started looking at different testing available for C. auris, and we contemplated batched PCR, real-time PCR that was done at King's College Hospital, carry on with culture, which was we were doing at the time, or introduce in-house testing with cartridge-based assays. The most important factor in transition to PCRs were obviously a quicker turnaround time, so the patient could be promptly isolated in order to prevent or manage a possible outbreak or an outbreak. We were looking for platforms which were easy to be operated, so that the bench could be run by medical laboratory assistants. Also, we were looking for cartridge-based nucleic acid amplification tests, such as the Vivalytics. We needed the test to be already CE marked, and also we had to make sure that we knew that the machine was working. So a clinical validation had already had to be done by the company, so that we obviously performed our own internal validation to make sure it met our criteria. However, we had to make sure the machine would work before we invested in it. Cost was a major factor, as we had to present a case to the trust board, and we were awarded the funding in order to introduce the new platforms. Another thing that we were looking for was a platform that would have the potential to be interfaced with the LIMS. So as the bench was potentially run by MLAs, the results would be able to be transmitted straight to the LIMS without the need to have a biomedical scientist there. And yeah, I think as I mentioned before, the main objective was to improve the total turnaround time of the results. Since introducing the Vivalytics to our workload, we have actually seen a major change in the turnaround time, as the PCR turnaround time is about 26 hours, while for culture we were looking at about 92 hours for a total turnaround time, specifically about 147 hours for positive and just under 91 hours for negatives. That meant that patients could be betterly managed and they could be moved accordingly. Patient colonized for C. auris, they wouldn't spend that much time in communal base. Also, the bench is managed by MLAs, so that has relieved some work from the biomedical scientists in the labs. We are capable of running 90 samples a day, operating on a long day from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 p.m. in the afternoon, 7 days a week. We have enhanced screening in place at St Thomas Hospital, so each ward is screened weekly, however on different weekdays, to make sure there is not a backlog to be created in the lab. Also, each patient is screened at admission and discharge. We would advise labs to implement PCR for C. auris if possible, as it would help with the management of the patients, so that an outbreak could be prevented or easily managed, as having a quick turnaround time will make sure patients which are colonized with C. auris do not spend too much time in communal areas.
So if any of the other hospitals out there are considering making the switch from culture to PCR, please contact Randox directly and we can reach out with the necessary support.